So as Ira said, I got into the Bitcoin space in 2010, which is pretty close to the beginning, and we didn't call it a blockchain space because it was just Bitcoin back then. It's a community that I'm a large part of now, and it's something that I'm really passionate about. The first Bitcoin conference or Bitcoin meetup I ever went to was just like 32 guys hanging out in a church basement in San Francisco. And I've basically been on tour for the last 7 months going to these events that some of them have, thousands and thousands of people at. And it's really been amazing to sort of watch this ecosystem evolve. So let's talk about that. The blockchain landscape. So in 2016, as an industry in ICOs, initial coin offerings, if you're not familiar, or token sales, we raised a little less than $100 million, about $96 million. And then last year, and this slide is wrong, like I said, I've been giving this speech for about 6 months, and I can't keep this slide up to date. It was originally like 1.6 billion, and then it was like 2 billion, and then 2.5, and 3.7. We actually finished out 2017 raising $4.3 billion just on these initial coin offerings, these token sales. So you can see that is like the velocity moving in that. In 2012, we had 71 blockchain-related patents in the United States. And then in 2016, we had 469. And last year, we had 834. So you can just see the innovation that's coming, that people are working on this, people are understanding the power and what this can do for our society. But there's sort of this 800-pound gorilla that people don't really like to talk about. Everyone knows that it's an issue, but we haven't really come up with any concrete solutions to deal with it. So I'm going to talk about blockchain developers' supply versus demand. So we did a poll of 200 Fortune 500 company executives, and of those 200, 188 of them had plans to implement blockchain technology, which is a great statistic. But what's a little more disconcerting is of those 188, only 12 of them actually felt that they could identify the talent to actually implement that blockchain technology. And this is indicative of this problem right here, is that currently on planet Earth, there are 14 available jobs for every one qualified blockchain developer. And we're in an industry that's looking to grow 16x over the next few years, and we're already a 14x deficit. So when you think about this, you start seeing some problems that can happen. And some of this we're already seeing. So there's a potential for an industry-wide bottleneck, and we already see this. Companies grow their engineering teams right now by poaching engineers from other developing teams. And so that's not a sustainable option. That's not scalable. We can't rob Peter to pay Paul to grow this brave new world that we all want. So personally, I actually think this is the largest threat to our entire sector right now, is this failure to attract engineering talent. And one of the things that we're going to see from that is we're going to see a lot of blockchain projects that are going to stall indefinitely. Now, some of those are going to stall because they suck. But some of them, like this awesome panel we just saw on Balboa Coin, things that like really can have amazing impact and can go a long way towards building this world that we all want to see, some of those are going to get stalled too, because they're not going to be able to attract enough engineering talent to build out the promises of their project. All right, so why have we been slow to train developers? Well, it actually makes a lot of sense if you think about it. Sorry, technical difficulties again. This is awesome. All right, so blockchain tech moves really quickly. So if you think about traditional educational systems, they move too slowly to actually incorporate this into any sort of meaningful curriculum. At an average university in the United States, a major curriculum change takes about 3 years after you've already identified a faculty member that's actually willing to walk this curriculum through. Now, I don't know how long the people in this space have been in the blockchain Bitcoin space, but if you can roll back the clock 3 years as to where we are as an industry, as opposed to where we are now, you'll see that if we wait 3 years for getting any sort of mainstream educational adoption, we're going to have some really big problems. The main reason why people aren't teaching this is that blockchain devs get paid a whole lot more to be in production. They get paid to be blockchain devs at a higher rate than they would to stop and teach this stuff. And a lot of those teachers are actually, a lot of those developers are actually people that are actually building these protocol layers out themselves. So they're innovating, but they're not really stopping to document what they're doing. And as an industry, we've failed to basically come up with educational standards for certification and education. And this has sort of put us in this issue that we have right now, which is that we're desperately in need of a lot more developers. So what's the solution? Last year, in April, I met a man who was going to end up changing my life. He's my current partner, John Souza. Now, John is the founder of Kingsland University in Atlanta, Georgia. Kingsland University is a fully U.S. accredited institution, university. It's accredited by the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools. And we met in Africa Burn, which is like Burning Man in South Africa. And he recognized me from the blockchain space. And he said, hey, I've got this university, and I want to do some executive education. I want to teach like Deloitte and KPMG and PricewaterhouseCoopers all about the blockchain. And I was like, man, that's a great market. You're going to make a lot of money. But that's not super interesting to me. So, I mean, I wish you well. I hope that works out very good for you. But, if you need any help, just let me know. But that's not a project I'm particularly interested in working on. And then 2 weeks later, I had the privilege to speak in front of the European Union on blockchain. And they invited me because, like, as Ira said, if you know me from the blockchain space, you know me for being a promoter of the use cases for blockchain for humanitarian aid. I founded the world's two first blockchain-based charities, Sean's Outpost, Satoshi Forest in Pensacola, Florida, and unsung.org, which is the app that he was describing. And so I went and was speaking to the European Union, but instead of being my normal jovial self, I was really angry, which is a weird thing for me. And I was angry because the EU in 2016 had spent $2.1 billion on giving to NGOs to feed refugees, primarily in Greece. And most of those refugees never got fed. So they spent $2.1 billion to feed people that didn't get fed, and it was actually worse because the EU didn't have a good accountability and transparency system for how their funds were spent as an NGO. NGOs that cash checks to feed refugees, even if the refugees ended up dying because they didn't feed them, those NGOs were able to come back to the table the next year and apply for the same program and get paid again to not feed refugees. So I went and I said, look, if you guys had a distributed identity system, if you gave all of these refugees and made them all part of a cohort, you could pull that cohort and say, hey, did you get fed today? And if enough of those refugees said no, guess what? That NGO doesn't get paid. And it's actually a very basic, very simple thing, but very, very powerful, especially in these use cases where we're talking about disenfranchised people that don't have a real voice to speak up for themselves. And so I was really mad, and I think they thought I was going to give them a very, flowery, feel-good speech about the promise of blockchain, and instead I was like, you bastards wasted $2 billion and people died. But after they kind of stopped the reeling from my tirade, they actually talked to my company, unsung.org, and they actually talked to us about the possibility of us building the system for them, building a distributed identity system for helping refugees and stopping this waste, fraud, and abuse there. And I got really excited. I thought this was amazing that we had, finally turned a corner. We had, funding, and we had the support of the EU to do this. So I was just going to go build a team and build this out. So I started calling blockchain developers. And my best friend is Steven Dack. He's one of the co-founders of Ethereum. And I said, Steve, man, we got this awesome opportunity at Unsung. We want to do this. I would love to help you, to have you spearhead the movement. And Steve was like, Jason, this is a great idea, but I have a job right now. I've got like 6 projects lined up behind that. I'm advising a bunch of companies. But when all of that clears off my plate, I would love to work on this. And I was like, cool, no problem. I'll call somebody else. And so I called the next guy. And I got essentially some version of that story. And then the same thing from the next guy and the next guy and the next guy. And so I stopped talking to developers and I started talking to blockchain executives in the space. And I said, hey, are you guys hiring developers? And you can't get the word developer out of your mouth before they'll be like, hey, do you know somebody? I'll hire them. I'll hire them. I'll hire their friends. I'll hire like their whole team. And I was like, well, I knew we had this problem, but how big is this problem? So we dug in and we found these statistics that I was talking about earlier, 14 available jobs for every qualified blockchain developer, and realized that this is a huge issue. And I'm probably more than anyone else in the world, I've spoken more on the promise of blockchain for humanitarian efforts. Like, that's what blockchain is really interesting to me for. And what I realized is that all of the really well-funded for-profit companies that want to do work in the blockchain space, if there's a very limited supply of developers, they're going to get 100% of that developer population. And all of these wonderful projects that I've been talking about and that I have passion for and my friends have passion for, they're going to be really strapped for engineering talent. And what that means is that these wonderful projects are going to stall out. So I went back to that guy, John Souza, and I said, look, this is crazy. And I know that this is not in line with what you had been doing, but what if we started a fully US accredited school for blockchain development that focused specifically on solving this problem? And so last year, we went to our accrediting body and got permission to stand this up, and I'd like to announce that we have started the Academy School of Blockchain at Kingsland University, the world's first fully US accredited school for blockchain development. Now, what we do at Academy is education is definitely something we think of, right? But it's a full circle thing. We do student recruitment, we do education, we do placement, and we do incubation and acceleration of the people that come through our program. So I'm going to kind of walk you through that right now. So our flagship project is that we have a 6-week full immersion course where we can take a qualified software developer and we can give them 6 weeks of hands-on project-based training in blockchain best practices so that you can go in a good software developer, and you can come out a good blockchain developer. And so we think this is the fastest method of getting more hands on deck in the blockchain revolution, is by taking people that actually already understand software development and basically just teaching them what it means to be a blockchain developer. And so we've already started doing this. So at Kingsland University, for almost 10 years, we've been providing technical training. We've trained over 275,000 students. So this, high-level technical training is not something that's new to us. And we're one of the leading providers of education for emerging and disruptive technologies. So here's just sort of our cavalcade of companies that we've worked for at Kingsland. We have done training for a lot of Fortune 500s, a lot of major technology providers. So we do have a history of doing this. At Kingsland, this isn't particularly relevant, I guess, in Panama, but I guess you could see the power of it here, and these are things that we are working with other governments as well. We're a Sachs-Cassie accredited school, and what that means is that the Department of Education has said that we are a valid place to receive education, and in the United States that gives us access to Title IV and Title IX funding. Title IV is all of the U.S.'s student grants and student loan programs. And Title IX is all of their Veterans Administration benefits, so Montgomery, GI Bill, vocational rehabilitation. The bottom line of that means that hundreds of billions of dollars in educational support are now available for training blockchain for the first time in history. And we're really proud of that.